Hello. There we go.
Perfect. Okay. So do we want to begin?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to, I guess, our first joint event with AIAS and NOMAS. Um, yeah, let's introduce the panel. Our panelists, we have Joshua Robinson from Perkins and Will Atlanta, Blake Reeves from Perkins and Will Atlanta as well, and Sarah Woynicz from HKS Atlanta. We're going to wait on Alina from Interlink in Puerto Rico a little later, see if she comes, but as of right now, it's just the three. So to reiterate why we're doing this event, it's in hopes that students and even our guests are going to be feeling, leaving this event, are going to be feeling better equipped to enter a world that's not as accepting, but to always kind of push that message of equality and inclusivity within our industry. And so that's the general basis of why we're doing this event. And we're very excited with our audience today. So, yeah.
All right, so without further ado, let's get started with the first question. I'm going to start off with Sarah, if you don't mind. Our first question is, what is diversity and what does it mean to you?
Oh man, coming out of the gate. Well, first of all, thank you all for kind of having us be a part of this conversation. I definitely share the feeling and sentiment that I hope to learn kind of as much from not only the panelists, but you all, as I hope to share. And I think, what is diversity and what does it mean to me? And I think I'm maybe going to answer this question in kind of like multiple different parts, because I think diversity can't exist without inclusion, equity, and belonging. So I think all of those are interrelated, because I do think kind of diversity in its nature and kind of standing alone in its own silo, does speak to kind of diverse experience and diverse backgrounds. So kind of that representation of not just existing kind of in a singular or a homogenous way, that's coming from people, from where they're from, the stories that they have, the experiences and background that they come from. And so that, to me, kind of is diversity in a nutshell. But when that exists on its own, you're kind of missing the inclusivity and the belonging aspects, which I think really boil down to, or kind of drill down into, what makes diversity so precious and so special. And I think that, if diversity is kind of having, the table is always used as a metaphor. And so, diversity is always having, that table and multiple different people at the table. And, inclusion is being asked, not only being asked to the table, but being asked to the table to show up as your true, genuine, authentic self. And I think that, those have to go hand in hand. And so that really kind of is what diversity ends up meaning to me, is not just existing on its own as this rich, unique experience that each of us come and bring as individuals, but really the part of inclusion and belonging, and that ability to show up as your true, authentic, genuine self.
All right, does anyone else, Joshua and Blake, want to add on your personal thoughts about this question as well?
I can jump in, Josh, or if you have something.
I'm looking at Blake because I don't know how to follow that. So.
Yeah, Sarah said so many good things and so many like little nuanced points that I want to hit. But I think that there another interesting part about diversity is it's so much more nuanced than we talk about and we discuss when we talk about the hundreds of various attributes that all go into making each of us unique, all the things that sort of end up in our DNA that we're born with, but even the things that are sort of around us that grow us and shape us as we grow up. You add those up and there's just millions and millions of combinations of who all these different people are, these 7 billion people on this earth. And it's easy for us to boil down diversity into these really quantifiable metrics like race, ethnicity, gender, these things that we can really see and things that people chart. But I also think another part of diversity is just that recognition that we are all just wildly different. And there's so much value in that. And it's sort of having eyes to see that and to appreciate that.
So you guys really took my talking points. I'm trying to think. I mean, I think the only other thing I could add on to what Blake was saying and what Sarah was saying is that, you know, diversity to me is also kind of like outside of the box. So outside of just thinking about the normal kind of racial diversity that we normally talk about, and also like sexual orientation, then there's also even like a kind of a like learning differences. So some of us that may actually have learning disabilities, like there's a lot that goes on there when you start thinking about diversity. Like there's a lot of people that I work with on a day-to-day basis that are dyslexic, but they sketch like no other, and like amazing with the way how they think about problems that I would never think about. So it's very interesting, but I think even just the way how we think can be diverse and how our teams kind of come together. So yeah, diversity has like a lot of different factors outside of just like the two ones that we always speak about. To me,
I love that. You know, the word diversity is something that we've so often put in. You're right. We've put it into this small box when the word itself should be this wide. It shouldn't. It should be so much more inclusive than what we have been considering it to be in the first place. That's so great. And you know, Sarah, you'd made such a beautiful point about, you know, the ability for it to be your authentic self. I love that. And you had made a really great point about diversity and how you can't really have diversity without inclusion, which kind of brings us to our next point about what inclusion is and what do you consider to be inclusion. So Josh, I kind of want to start with you. Like, what do you consider inclusion to be within a workplace specifically? Like, what is inclusion? What does inclusion look like to you? Because different people have different perspectives of inclusion.
okay. I think inclusion. I mean, of course, one like diverse and inclusive like hiring practices is like one of the first things that my mind goes to, and you know, one of the things that I don't know. I'm gonna try and not talk about the firm. To me, it would be, I guess, the way how we start engaging and interacting. So when someone is kind of coming on board to our firm, whether or not we're asking them which school they went to, or if we're just solely judging them based off of their work and like the character of who they are, that kind of starts bringing a more like inclusive role to me, because then you kind of remove the person's like functional roles. You kind of remove their pedagogy and where they went to school and all those other nuances, and you actually simply look at them for the being they are and what they actually bring to the table. So to me, that's kind of the inclusiveness. Also, you know, like I am pretty young in my career. So like there is like a whole age thing that comes into that too, where like years of experience is also a huge thing. So that is also something that I not only really champion for, but I'm really grateful that I do get to participate in, and that really speaks to me. Outside of, you know, like the main two that are, of course, like race and sexuality, those two really, I think both age and like pedagogy and just like people's background are the two. When we kind of remove those filters and start that mixing pot, we really end up getting really unique and amazing design solutions. I hope I answered that. I don't know if I did.
No,
I'm gonna jump in because I totally think that you did, and I think kind of really just speaking to how a person, you know, there's a door that's open for you, and it's not just, you know, based on any kind of qualifier or quantifier about who you may be. And I think, Josh, I was really appreciative of where you hit on kind of that age component. And I see, you know, inclusion, especially when you talk about inclusion in the workplace. I think years of experience is often a metric that is assigned in our industry. And there's not necessarily anything to say that that's a negative or a positive, but I think sometimes that years of experience can be a limiting factor when it comes to inclusion on projects or inclusion of perspective. And I think there is to a degree kind of a rational and logical kind of role and career progression that anybody will experience in the industry. And, you know, starting out of school, you might be tasked with certain concepts and, have kind of one lens that you see a project within versus somebody who's 20 years of experience and is able to put on a different lens based on those experiences. But just because you might be, 20 days out of school doesn't mean that your experience and perspective is any less valid or less worthy of inclusion within any role on a project than that person that's 20 years out. It just might look different and be approached from different scales. And so I think really when it comes to thinking about project specific, I mean, I sit back and I learn from my peers, every single day, whether they're 2 years younger than me or 20 years older than me. And so I think really when it comes to projects, inclusion is, as an individual, not just asking and seeking out those opportunities, but being able to have those opportunities also available to you and be included in those. And I think particularly in a virtual format that we now are in, physical barriers or proximity to something like a client meeting has been totally broken down and eroded because there is nothing that says that somebody can't join a call and listen in, that and kind of the value of knowledge that you can gain simply from being present. Now, inclusion does, I think, take a step beyond just being present because then there's the ability to affect and impact change. But I think Josh, what you said about, that age is not necessarily a qualifier that should ever restrict or limit or not include someone.
You're on mute, Blake.
Trying to be helpful and it's always ends up failing me. Yeah, I love all this. I kind of would like to talk about a slightly different side of that inclusivity, which is like who is informing the design and how inclusivity feeds into that. And I'm an urban designer, and by trade. I am a history nerd by nerdy excitement. And so I think there's one way to talk about this, which is talk about what inclusivity is not. I think that's an easier way to inform that. And I think when I look back at the history of us building this nation, and as an urban designer, I think about the human built environment, the places that public realm spaces that are designed in ways to or intended to improve people's quality of life. And 50 plus years ago, we had a design industry. I mean, and even closer than that, it's just easier to make a blanket statements about a long time ago. We had situations where it was just predominantly, straight, cisgender, white, able-bodied males making decisions for the public realm for everyone else. And there's countless examples in the history of of our country where we built things that have been failures because that group of people said, well, this is what I like. Therefore, this is what we should do. And we're spending lots and lots of, federal dollars, local dollars, public funds to build things that no one used because they were not appropriate contextually or culturally to a people that were there. And so fast forward to that was the failing. So what does that mean in 2021? It's the inclusivity happens or can happen at every single level within a firm, as we're talking about here, both Josh and Sarah talking about hiring practices and who can you involve at different levels to actually get in and be a part of their design, but also on the community engagement side. I mean, there is, we as all designers, and I think this group, it crosses the realm. I think there's interiors, I think there's architects, a little bit of everyone on this group. There is always a context to our design and we should be super conscientious of it. When there's always a question of who our design will impact. And I think it's really easy to put a narrow blinders on and say that there's a user or a client and that's who we're impacting. But no, there's not a single project that doesn't have larger impact. And so we need to be asking who our projects will be impacting and getting engagement, including a diverse range of voices who can come in and talk about ways that a simple project, small, medium, or large, whatever it is, could provide benefit from them. Could a small site that you're building on, could it carve out a corner to build a really cool, interesting civic plaza that ends up being a win-win for a community that's lacking community space and a retail user on the first floor that gets activation. There's ways that you can create these all kinds of mutual benefits, but you won't recognize that and see that until you start asking voices that are different from your own, both out in the world, but even in the firm. We should be, as we've kind of alluded to in the previous question about diversity, there is diversity in a lot of firms, but if those people don't feel like they have the ability to step up to the plate and speak their mind and speak their diverse opinion, that firm is failing. Like that everyone should be able to bring their unique voice and know that it is respected and it is valued, and that diversity of perspectives is what will actually hone the project and the product and make it the best it can be. So
that was great. That was a great response.
Really, yeah, really amazing. And I think that that speaks to something that we're going to talk about next, which is how one can create a safe space within a new workplace. You know, we have a lot of people here have intern students, and whether you're a minority, as you all are, and many of us are here of, you know, sexual orientation or color of our skin, ethnicity, gender, it's hard for you to kind of come into a new workplace and kind of demand or just, you know, have any respect, especially when you're a minority. So how do you go about kind of, you know, just creating that safe space and wanting to be comfortable within, you know, an office that's predominantly possibly white males, when we all know that 2 in 5 new architects are only women, and I think 1 in 5 less are people of a different ethnicity. So how do you go about doing that, or how have you guys gone about doing that when you started out working, or it may have been another firm that you guys initially began to work at younger or early on? This is to Blake. To Blake, sorry about that.
I was gonna say, make him go first.
Yeah, fine. Man, it takes a lot of work. Well, sorry, let me backtrack. Every firm is so different in this capacity, and when you go out to job interviews, you should be able to ask hard questions if that stuff is important to you immediately. And you know, an interview is like a date. You're both asking questions to get to know each other, and you as an interviewee have the ability to sort of demand answers about things. So first off, you should be making it a point to research firms that you potentially want to work at and see if it's a place that is sort of championing diversity and inclusion. But once you get in, I hope you'll get into a place that respects a diversity of opinions. But if not, there may be structure in place that allows you to go about it, but there also might not be. I think I showed up to my studio. I've been here for 5 years, and it's a fairly open-minded, in a lot of ways, progressive studios, but there was absolutely zero open discussion about any type of LGBT issues. And through a lot of really awkward, uncomfortable conversations, it's now something that we've made because of a small group of us. We're like, this seems weird. And it seemed like there were a lot of missed opportunities, and we were celebrating, the studio was celebrating different, other different cultures and other different heritage groups. And so we kind of took Pride several years ago and said, let's make Pride a thing here in our studio. And it was super awkward to have to like go to HR and these people and be like, is this going to be cool? And then be like, I don't know, let's wait and see. And so the leadership was behind us and said, of course, this is important to us. Of course, this aligns with our values. But at the same time, we have no idea what the response you'll get. And that first year, we had like a really overwhelming response that turned into a week-long event that coincided with Atlanta Pride festivities. And since then, it's sort of been an open discussion in a really interesting way, both in terms of adding another more nuanced layer to our overall diversity conversations, which is exciting, but also even just personally, I mean, it's like constantly pre-COVID when we were in the studio, sitting there for lunch and someone coming up and being like, hey, my best friend's son just came out and she needs some advice. Like, please tell me anything. I'm like, oh, great. And I'm like, I'm glad that this is, we've created a place where those discussions are just casual lunch table conversations. And before it was like silence. And I don't know, it's so it takes work at times, but if you care about it and you're passionate about it and you know it's going to improve the culture that you're in and it's going to make you personally more sane, feel more sane in your workplace, like the fight is well worth it. And in 2021, I can pretty much promise you more times than not, you're going to see positive reception than negative reception.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Well spoken.
that's such a good space to be in, and to be able to have comfort, not only, you know, in your workplace, but, you know, taking it out a step further and being able to have those same conversations that you wouldn't have in the workplace, you know. So that's really nice to have.
And helping diversify your company to help them brand. So many companies we see now are able to advertise the fact that they are pro-LGBTQ, and they have, you know, different side events that cater to people of minorities. And that's really, that's super nice to see as an intern or someone looking for a firm to have that space already to go into. So yeah, that's really amazing that, you know, you can be a catalyst in creating that for your company.
Yeah, I think, yeah,
Yeah, Sarah.
to add in, I think not only, you know, from a inclusion or diversity standpoint, are we seeing things that, you know, hasn't been seen in the industry in the last 5 years, the last 10 years. But we're seeing things like architecture firms talking about mental health and psychological safety and things like that, which you haven't seen in the last year in the industry. And those are, I think they're definitely, you know, hard conversations. I mean, you know, Blake, you talk about, you know, fighting the fight and hard conversations. And I remember like a number of times that, you know, something has been about to come out of my mouth, and there's been like this moment where like my breath has caught, and it's like, all right, here we're going to go and we're going to do this. And sometimes that's easier than not. And the times that becomes easier to kind of open yourself up to the potential for belonging is when that psychological safety or that environment has been created in the firm that you're with. And that could look different with any firm. It could even look as different as with an office or with a studio. So it's very different, and it's very people dependent. But I think, and it not only starts at the bottom, but it also starts at the top. And it starts at, what is your leadership willing to not compromise and not sacrifice on? What kind of example are they willing to set and say, this is important to us, and therefore this is the dialogue that we're going to have? You know, whether it's watching a movie about Ruth Bader Ginsburg during lunch one day and all having a conversation about it, and 50 people in the office show up. To talk about, you know, women and leadership in a profession where women weren't known to be present. And it's not anything even related to architecture, and yet it simultaneously is related to everything that any person in an office is dealing with. And so, you know, that when you talk about psychological safety, it might not look like a project, and it might not look like billable hours, but it might look like a weekly team huddle with, you know, team members from all across the world, and just sharing a bit about what's going on in your week. You know, who had construction done on their house, or is, you know, is there a new holiday in India that your peers in India are celebrating? And so it really starts to, you know, give a little bit of grace and humanity to a person. And really kind of open that door for that safety and that conversation and that culture and environment to emerge. And you won't always know that when you walk in the door of a firm. You won't, it's not something that you can maybe instantaneously see, but it's something that fairly shortly you will know, and be able to feel that presence of it being there or not being there, and be able to, again, kind of impact that change and kind of try and start to push the envelope and turn the needle a little bit. But I think as an industry, we're seeing that kind of dialogue about mental health, psychological safety, belonging emerge in ways that even in the last year, it hasn't even been present.
I've been thinking about what to say. And I guess I want to speak on, if you are not at one of those firms. I was not at a firm like the one I'm currently at when I first interned, and it was very different and very Southern and old school and just different. Great people, but different. And I realized it very quickly that it was kind of a boys' club, and I had to learn the art of humanizing myself so that people could actually connect with me and see me kind of as a person. And it does kind of suck sometimes, but I had to kind of take on the role of teaching my coworkers and my peers what life is like as a minority, and kind of like explain to them that. And that's kind of one of the ways I moved the needle, as Sarah was saying before. And you kind of have to choose whether or not you want to do that. Sometimes people say, you know what, this isn't really worth it for me. I just want to leave and go somewhere else. Other people say, you know, I actually want to stay here, and I think this is a place for me. I just need to kind of carve my place out. Just know that whichever one you choose, both are right.
I'm talking probably too much. One thing that's sort of a theme of what we're saying is that sometimes the burden is unfairly on people who belong to marginalized communities to bring everyone else to where they at, and unfortunately that's a reality. But there's also a lot of power and beauty in it when you can do it, and it's extremely fulfilling when you can kind of bring everyone together around some of these issues.
Great, that was great, which is going to lead us to our next question, ironically, Josh. I'm going to start with Sarah. This question is, have you ever had to overcome any adversities in your workplace? And if so, what were the strategies that you used to overcome that and employ that?
So it's kind of like a yes and no, which the no is kind of like one of those, I feel very grateful for being in the environment that I'm in, surrounded by the people that I'm surrounded by, to have those allies and to have those advocates. But the yes is, I mean, it's yes, I'm a woman and I work in construction administration sometimes, and I am LGBTQ, and that was a really interesting thing when I showed up to company events. And so I think I have been treated differently, particularly from being a woman and in the industry. I have at times been superseded for questions compared to my male peers. I have had clients, consultants, and contractors all kind of run around me to go and look for validation from some of my male peers and supervisors. And that's tough, especially, I mean, I would like to think that I'm a very driven, motivated woman and individual who learns and wants to do my best and represent my firm the best that I can. And so it was very tough and at times very personal. But I think that at the end of the day, what it came back to and kind of overcoming that was not only in myself and in kind of holding my line and responding to that email or readdressing the conversation and responding directly to whoever was trying to kind of circumvent and go around me. But also having my male coworkers do the same and say, Sarah's covering this, Sarah's got this, or having them turn to me and say, I know you've been the one working on this, like, can you respond? Or, and so kind of having that come back home, and kind of that ownership of whatever the situation might be, having it come back to where I was and not having my male peers answer for me in that situation. And that's not always the case. And I've definitely had instances where that hasn't been the case, and that's been very frustrating. But to, I think, kind of continue to advocate and continue to say, like, here's what I'm doing, here's my process, and I think, like, you know, it's a little bit of the reassurance, which sometimes is not, you know, validating as a professional. It's saying I shouldn't have to explain myself to you, but simultaneously, it is kind of just like holding your ground and saying, I have covered this. You have mentored me and trained me for a reason, and I'm where I am today for a reason, and I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't have the responsibility or the ownership within our projects, within our relationships, if you didn't have this confidence in me. And then just making sure to be resilient and diligent in that, and responding in a way that kind of directs it back, and sometimes even having to say, you know, I've been on calls, you know, even with clients, to say, hey, we're taking meeting minutes. This is a recorded meeting. Are you are you sure that you intended to say that? And, you know, sometimes there is a little bit of checking, and again, a little bit of educating and kind of, you know, making sure that that is what was actually intended to be said. And sometimes some grace to allow a chance for education and allow a chance for correction. So it's definitely hard, but I think being able to stand your ground and to educate where appropriate and where needed, to, you know, if needed, to end conversations and say, this isn't appropriate. We are in a professional environment and this isn't appropriate or professional for the relationship that we have. But remember to still kind of hold true to yourself and kind of hold your ground in that.
I would agree with that. That's especially holding true to yourself and holding your ground. I have been in the fortunate situation when I was in school and I was interning at a company. It was another small, I don't know why all these, maybe it's the South, but it was I'm from New York originally, so that's why there's probably a whole regional thing there. But it was a small construction firm that I was working at. They found out that I was gay, all this kind of like chaos happened. I ended up actually like losing the internship and I was like devastated. Um, and after I went through my whole like sad phase for like a week, I decided like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna fly to New York and I'm gonna like live with my cousins for the rest of the summer. And I decided when I flew out there that, you know, I'm gonna try and get an internship out here. Why not? And I did that. And I was lucky enough to get like an awesome internship in Manhattan at a really cool like boutique like firm designing all these like really cool townhomes. And I never would have had that opportunity or experience if I, one, didn't get fired from another job, two, didn't end up saying, you know, I'm going to double down on myself and fly to another city and get another job where people are more accepting of people who look like me and are gay. So that's what I guess my whole thing is simply like, I know it's cliche to say believe in yourself, but you've been doing this for a while, you're going into the field, you are going to be experts if you're not already, like you're very close to it, believe me. So double down on yourself.
Yeah, I want to second a thing Sarah kind of started with early on is just the absolute importance of allyship. I recognize that there's a lot people on this call who belong to different marginalized groups, but there also are people are not. And for both parties, you have to recognize that there is some, you know, anytime that there's privilege, there also, you know, is oppression, and we've got to be standing up for each other. And that's really easy to say in your personal life when you think about your friends and things, but you force that same conversation through the work filter, and all of a sudden it leads to kind of clumsy situations a lot. And you know, I've been on both sides of it. I've been in you know, at client meals where clients who didn't know that I was a gay man were making homophobic comments, and I did not personally want to speak up and kill a conversation, mid-conversation, but I was surprised that the 5 or 6 coworkers with me who all knew that I was gay did not. And I think that was what was like the thing that was hurtful. Like, that's a client who doesn't know me, whatever. I can write off his opinion and not worry about it. But the fact that no one came in and intervened, either at the time or even when we left later and said like, I'm sorry you had to hear those awful statements. Those are the things where it's just like a little bit soul crushing sometimes. And it can lead to these feelings of sort of disconnect from the firm and the body, and things that ultimately are sort of lose-lose for everyone. And so you all as an ally have a role to jump in and play at all times. And so that's sort of with your coworkers and really creating the culture of belonging, but also on the other side of it as part of the design process. I mean, I would say probably 50% of my clients as an urban designer are big developers, and that is not a diverse group of people that I'm answering to. And often times there are these statements said about like, oh, well, people like X, therefore we should do this. And they're really broad brush statements that are just kind of incorrect, and there's sort of bias and prejudice loaded in them. Or just speaking about, well, that community on that side of the project is, you know, is X or whatever. And there's ways that I have to like intervene. And this is like a hard thing that I've learned over time, to be an ally for that community that's not even in the room, but to like help a client see that their vision is limited and that there is a diversity of people that they could and should be thinking about. And so it's sort of allyship for people you don't even know, but that you know exist, and you know that like can and will be impacted by projects.
Yeah, and that happens even not at the urban design and master planning scale. I mean, I have had that happen with how many toilets to include in an office building, because there are more men being attracted to the office building than women. And so, yeah, it happens all the way down to the scale of a bathroom. And it is, I think Blake nailed it in having to be able to push that envelope and push that box outside of kind of just one lens from which you can view you general statement, but one lens of which a project can be viewed from, to the, I love the term of Jedi being termed as a lens from which you view the world, and being able to put that lens on and filter it in your workspace with your work culture as well as within your projects.
Yeah. And this is funny. We keep talking about this kind of as like a moral imperative almost. But I think one thing that's real interesting is that when you're actually in the business world, you can't have this conversation without also translating it to someone else as a business imperative. And that's like a fun and exciting challenge. I think both internally within a design firm to talk about just like, no, we actually have to go to interviews being like, what different thing do you bring to the table? Oh, that's super cool that your Indian background means that you love finding beauty in the little small everyday. That's cool. Come bring that to the table. You have to go seek out those things and realize there's a business case for having those different perspectives in the room and informing the design in a way. From the business or from the internal side. From the external side, you have to be able to speak to clients and really explain how no, you can get more community buy-in if you go out and do community engagement, or people are going to come if you give them the thing. If you go out and ask people what they want and you give it to them, they're probably going to come more, and so it is interesting that we can sit around and talk about it being a feel-good thing all day, but in the business world, you have to translate it to business, and it's easy to do. And so you just be ready to find those words,
I love that. That's so great. I also wanted to introduce our fourth panelist who was able to join us, Alina Vilas. She works for Interlink in Puerto Rico. So we're really excited to have Alina here with us today. But Blake, you brought up a lot of really incredible points about allyship, which kind of leads into our next question, which is about if you or a coworker are experiencing discrimination, or you witness any type of injustice happening to the coworker, or you see it like on a project, for example, how can you advocate for yourself or for someone else? And especially if you're an intern, for example, like or a new hire, how can you find your voice? As students, we can find our voices through organizations, through speaking with our professor. But when you move into a work environment, that's a really difficult transition to make. And being able to find your voice in that type of setting can be really hard. And in internships, it can be even harder. So how can you go about doing that and being an ally, especially in such a short setting as an internship? I don't know if Blake, you want to kick us off again?
Hi, Alina, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, hi, Alina, we can hear you.
Oh, hi. First of all, thanks for having me on this panel. I think it doesn't really matter if you're an intern or not. You should definitely speak up and just wait, hold on. I'm having trouble with this service. Hi, okay, yeah, I'm back. So yes, I don't think it really matters if you're an intern or not. The best thing is to be really honest and with your coworkers, and there's no way that you'll feel discrimination. And there are a lot of panels and there are a lot of rules. And at least in our company, it really doesn't happen. Typically, it's only me. Typically, it's an industry of like a lot of men, but it's because I'm in construction. if I would be in an architecture film, it would be entirely different. It has happened to me before. So, I mean, I wouldn't feel threatened about it. And even if you, I mean, I know most of you are students. I don't think you should feel or even worry about, becoming, on feeling like that on your next job.
I have to agree. I think that you have to actually just draw a line in the sand and say like enough is enough. There was two instances. Yeah, there were two things that happened, and actually at this job, and both weren't at work. They were like on the actual site with like contractors. One is that my senior associate is a female, and she's amazing, awesome. She should be a principal by now, honestly. I don't know how I'm gonna ever like reach to her level. But I'll never forget what it was, a new contractor on site, and he kind of like just turned to me and the other architect and kind of completely dismissed her. And in that moment, I kind of turned to her. I'm just like, hey, Katie, being the senior associate, and I kind of said her full title. I'm just like, what do you think since you're leading this project? And that's a good way to like correct him so he'll never do that again. And every time I'm around him, I always make sure to defer to her. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because it was kind of disrespectful what he was doing to her, and I didn't like it. But yeah, I would say that drawing that like line in the sand is what I've always tend to do, even as an intern. It's going to be awkward, and honestly, that's what it is. I tell people all the times that whatever they're feeling is between them and their priests, and it's not between me. So they can take it there. And that's kind of the approach I have. It's a little bit of a rough one, but I approach it like very aggressively because I think that that's the way it needs to be dealt with.
I am going to answer the question slightly differently, but answer it from the lens of kind of how to be that ally. And I'm focusing on the perspective of, let's say this is an instance where I have not experienced any kind of bias, or I have not personally experienced any kind of discrimination in this instance, but it's been a peer or a coworker. So I think, like Blake said, when in a position of privilege, you always have the opportunity to make a choice. As hard as that choice might be or not, sometimes it's a very easy one. Like Josh said, here's the line in the sand, period. But you always have that choice to use your voice to elevate or to empower others. And that can look very differently. I've had very recent experiences with a peer where it's been a situation, and I've asked them after our conversation, are you comfortable if I go and say XYZ, or I go and ask this question to somebody who I know is above me and has privilege and has potential to make a change and has an answer to this question. And so I always ask first, can I take this? Because it's not mine, it's not my story, it's not my thing to share per se, but it's an instance where I am put in a position of allyship and have the opportunity to ask, now that you've shared and we've been in this space together, is there something that you need? Is there something that I can do? And sometimes you won't have the opportunity to ask that question because it's going to be instantaneous, and you're at the dinner table with clients, and it's that moment where you just need to say something to be an ally and to stand up for whatever it is. But sometimes there is that opportunity to ask and say, you've now disclosed something personal, professional, whatever it might be with me, and as your ally and as your person, may I carry this forward? And sometimes, and that can be like difficult, just to kind of know and to say like, all right, now you have a choice and you have the opportunity to do something about that. Kind of from the perspective of an ally, knowing that you have that choice and you have shared in that space. And sometimes a person just needs to be in an echo chamber with you and just needs that support. And sometimes they need that elevation and they need that empowerment alongside another person. And you have that opportunity to stand with them and walk with them. So I think it can look different. And I think that sometimes there's a hard line in the sand and you draw it and then you say, I'm not crossing it and I'm going to walk the other way. whether you walk with me or not. But I think other times that, you know, if you are in the position of being an ally, there's somebody else who's drawing that line, and then you are now approaching and having to navigate and kind of walk forward with whatever they might be, you know, bringing with or sharing with you or disclosing with you.
I'm not even sure there's that much to say because we've covered this in lots of different ways, but I feel like we kind of alluded to this before, but like when you walk into a job, you need to like know what you're willing to stand for and what you want to stand for, and you need to recognize the things that will allow you to feel like you're in a healthy work environment and a healthy environment, and you need to sort of like, you know, plant a flag and be willing to not move on that. There's all kinds of recourse if things happen in a given firm, where HR might be able to intervene for you, or other people, as we're talking about, might be able to, or it might just require that you leave. That might be the healthiest thing for you. It's just, I got to go. I would say, I would hope that most people sort of have the wherewithal to do that, but some don't. And I think that the point of what Sarah's kind of been making is having eyes to look around to see the people, that your peers, your colleagues, and asking yourselves if they appear to be in a headspace that's healthy, or if they appear to be taking regular sort of any type of oppression, even the small microaggressions that are eating them up, and figuring out if you can intervene in a way. So I don't know. I think we all just need to be looking out for each other, I think, is the short end of this. So yeah, be good humans. Yeah, that's my finish on that.
I love that. Be good humans. Everyone needs to have that written on their wall somewhere. It's a nice daily reminder.
Yeah, and great points. Well, this wouldn't be a virtual interview without asking, what has COVID affected? And in terms of kind of spreading that awareness and starting, even, some people do, and I know in a lot of firms, you have those events, or lunch events that you may be watching some type of film of diversity, or you congregate with other people of the same minority groups. How do people continue to foster that aspect of inclusivity within a firm through this virtual platform? Or how have you guys done it, or know someone who has done it?
I would say now more than ever, it's kind of come to like the forefront of all of our minds, especially watching what happened last year play out in the media so publicly. It was a wake-up call to all of us. And I think that while the virus was like a horrible thing that has happened and is happening, it also silenced the world around us so that we were able to actually see all the injustices that have been going on. And because of that, we have really kind of asked ourselves, what can we do about this? We have forced ourselves to have safe space conversations with each other. We have had a lot of different lunch calls and a lot of initiatives that we've started to do, both reaching out at both the university level, at community base. We've asked ourselves, what can we do in each one of our projects to actually start practicing what we preach all the time, and all the amazing, nice marketing things we like to say. We actually took a hard look at ourselves and we said, are we really doing this? We pulled the spreadsheet numbers and we said, how many people of color and how many just how many different minority groups do we have in our firm? What are the actual numbers like? What is the data? Are we really doing this? And we had a really open dialogue as a firm globally about this. And the dialogue has been happening almost like monthly since then. If not, it's probably picked up even more because now we're very aware of it, and we've been fighting. We've all been fighting to change that in the way. So I hope that kind of answers. But we've been very aggressive with changing the way to do that. I think Blake can speak more to it because he's more in that role.
Yes, but I was planning on answering the question totally differently. I think yes, everything you said, Josh. I think working remotely and being remotely, if not thought about strategically, has the potential to make people feel very isolated. And I think there is a type of, just to stay connected with teammates, there's been like a real need for people to institute all types of communication to sort of get over this distance gap. And I think early on that communication was like, how can we collaborate, and all these, like really simple, like we need to figure out our work task remotely. And then I think there was this second wave, which is like, holy crap, we're all going nuts. We're all depressed. We're like, crying whenever I turn off Zoom because I've had feelings and I don't know what they are. There was just like this whole wave of things. And I think so that next wave was like, how do we make sure we're good? Like everyone's actually good. And it's crazy that being physically distant is the most I've ever felt emotionally close to my coworkers, because I think I truly have been on calls now where like multiple people are crying, just having a work discussion room, just like, I'm so stressed, this is a lot, and the willingness to sort of like break down some of those emotional walls actually sort of somehow supersedes the physical distance. But you can only get there, I think, when you're willing to ask those questions and to not think about it as awkward, and to just sort of recognize it as the human condition, and make space for all those things to be valid, really, I guess.
Yeah, I love the breaking down of barriers. Like, so prior to like the last couple of years and having the opportunity to professionally grow, I was never the person to pick up the phone and call someone. I was always like, let me write it down. What am I going to say? Oh my gosh, do I have to call a rep? Like, it was even the phone call of like the person that's never going to see you again over the phone. And I was still terrified of those phone calls. And I think kind of being able to kind of erode that barrier and say, I might be nervous, this might put me way far out of my comfort zone, but it's going to start with a call. And especially in this virtual environment, that's kind of the tool that we have. You can't walk over to somebody's desk, you can't tap them on the shoulder. You literally do like have to pick up the phone and call. And I think kind of in being able to kind of make that first step, and it gets a little less awkward and uncomfortable the more that you do it, but it does kind of start to create this sense of comfort and the sense of being able to do it. And so I think using those tools, and I've actually found it even start to ripple beyond just the people that I work with maybe on a day-to-day, and into team calls where it's a team that's literally sitting in New Delhi, and we're having calls, and we are talking, like somebody's dog pops up because it's 6 p.m. their time and their dog is hungry, or my cat just ate breakfast and so he's come and sit on on my bookshelf behind my computer or something. So it starts to kind of create this humanity of each other. And I think that everybody's kind of in this same similar space, and yet we're all like having different experiences and different relationships with it. But I think there's been a grace from understanding that we all have to pick up the phone, we all have to call, we all can't walk over to each other, because sometimes walking over to each other might be a million miles away, sometimes it might just be the neighbor next door, but we're not there right now. And so there's been some grace and understanding, just that this is kind of the tools that we have to face what we're facing with, and kind of being able to take that as it comes and adapt, and just pick up the phone and call. So I think for especially looking and saying, all right, hey, I'm about to go into an internship, or I'm about to start a brand new job, I think if like nothing else, getting through that awkward phase of, oh, it feels weird to pick up and get on a Teams call or a Zoom call, but keep doing it and keep asking for it, because it'll start to feel less weird the more that you do it.
Yeah, these are great points. And honestly, when Joshua, you brought it up, and I think obviously this virtual kind of world that we're living in right now has propelled so many companies into being more inclusive and equal. And I really can't speak for you, Sarah, and AIAS, but I know that Jedi and Joshua, you initially reached out to NOMAS. And so that, I think, was such a huge step in, in pushing that that message of inclusivity within this platform that we would have never have done, or I don't know if you guys would have, done that if not for all this happening. So I think definitely it's been such a blessing. And I know that even if it wasn't for COVID, also Sonia and I, it may not have worked out NOMAS the way it has. And if this is our first year of revitalizing the chapter, it's been such an amazing year to actually revitalize NOMAS for our university. So I'm really grateful for that. And it's brought about so many amazing things. Zoom, ironically.
Absolutely. Yeah, Joshua, I just want to say really quickly, you brought up something that was really important about being assertive and standing your ground, which is, I could say, sometimes very hard for us as college students, as someone feeling that we're at the bottom of the barrel. So using the platforms through social media, kind of like with this past year, has kind of just allowed us to be a little bit more confident in communicating and reaching out and talking to people. I've never gone out talking to so many people that I would have never done a year ago. So with this panel, this has been a great opportunity for all of us to really put ourselves out there, get a little bit out of our comfort zone and have these discussions. And I'm just really, really happy with the turnout and able to talk with you guys. So thank you so much. And I think now if anyone had any questions, they wanted last questions before we end. If anyone wants to chime in, the floor is now open to you guys.
Yeah, I have a question. So hello, I'm Juanita, and this has just been such a great experience as a woman and Latina myself. Being and hearing all of your experiences is amazing, just kind of getting used to all of that and the firms and all of that. And I just had a quick question, kind of to ask if you have had an experience with a group where you were actually included in, but you didn't initially think you belonged at a part of. And how did that kind of change your feeling and change your mindset towards the future and other kind of endeavors that you went on towards?
I could actually, it's me weird for me to say this, but I could say this now. I was actually terrified of like working at a big firm. And like, like I just thought that it would be like very like corporate and rigid. Like I didn't think like I work in the healthcare sector, but I didn't think it would be the way it was. Not only were they really inclusive and amazing. I know it's not really a group because it's like a company, but I was kind of shocked about all of it, honestly, and also like it really opened my perspective. And I was like, okay, like there are really good people. Like I guess I saw a different perspective of the world and of the design world, because as you can tell from my stories, some of the smaller firms were not working out that well. But this one just happened to. So I was really like fortunate. I also just kind of want to like say like one other point just before I forget this, because Sonia, you're just speaking about it, but I just want to kind of tell all of you that it's kind of okay to be terrified to stand your ground, because I make it seem like it's really, really easy. Believe me, it's not. But if you don't do it, like no one is going to do it for you.
Right.
And that's something that like I've come to realize. Like if I do not fight for myself, who is? I guess I'm just gonna say this because I'm already talking. But in a sense, like someone told me years ago, they said, like your boss is never gonna pay you to be his neighbor or her neighbor. Like you're gonna have to kind of fight for that. And it's kind of the same method with anything you want in life. And that's why I'm just saying like you kind of have to be a little assertive with it. And I kind of always live my life by like these 3 little like rules. They're like the 3 little R's, which is I'm always very real and I just try to be as humble and as real as possible. Whatever I think comes out my mouth, it's good and bad. I try to be respectful and listen to people, and I'm also a little ruthless. And somehow it just kind of all works out magically. I'm sorry, Juanita, but I'll let the others answer. I just wanted to say that before I forgot it.
Yeah, that's like a drop the mic and kind of walk out.
was great.
I did want to add, because I think for like full sake, well, all three of us are from large firms, right? At least at this point in time right now. And so kind of, I think while we've had separate experiences, we also our current experiences from kind of that larger firm mentality, even though we might be in smaller to mid-sized offices in the context of a larger firm. But I think to offer a perspective from a small firm is I interned with a very small, single family residential design build firm, one of my internships. And that was the internship where I realized that I wanted to be an architect. And so like prior to that, I didn't have any idea. I was like, if this doesn't work out, I'm almost at the halfway point. So I'll just leave school and figure something out. And architecture school in its own kind of way was a huge step for me, because I went from a almost predominantly white heterosexual suburban life that was all that I knew, and I knew like growing up that was everything I wanted to get away from. So that was I was drawing the line and getting out, was kind of the perspective that I had. And architecture school was that literal like opening up for me, which was beautiful and amazing in and of itself, and nothing that I ever expected it to be, but everything that I hoped it to be. But then this internship became the first moment where I saw a woman LGBTQ identifying architect. And it was life changing for me, because I all of a sudden saw I had that visual, tangible representation right there for me. And I could look and I could see and say, I see myself, I see my future, I see my career. And I think one thing that the industry is really struggling with, and I mean, we see it all over the place. You see it with 400 Forward, now 500 Forward, is where is this identity? Where is this presence, this role model, and pushing for that. And so I think for me, it came in a small firm, and it came in seeing a person who had just started their own business, who was fabricating and doing design and construction, and looking and seeing, hey, that could be me one day. And I had no idea prior to that was what I could achieve or what I could attain, and then beyond. But it was that moment where all of a sudden I had that identity and I could feel it myself personally. And I think that's what firms particularly are really looking at, the pipeline, looking at how are they supporting young professionals that have just graduated? How are they supporting emerging professionals in licensure? So that way the industry looks like the people who are trying to shape the industry, and it looks like our communities, and it has experiences that our communities have and the people we're designing buildings for have. And it doesn't just have one singular identity that defines what an architect is or who an architect is. And I think I had a unique experience, and I think that the industry as a whole is pushing and trying to say we need change. And the change is starting with students like yourself saying, I'm here, and I might not look like the way the industry's looked for the last 50 years, but I'm here and I'm not going anywhere.
I don't have anything to add. I didn't know if there were more questions, so I was going to be quiet.
I'll ask a question if no one else has a question. First of all, thank you all for being here. Y'all are great. As someone who's kind of going into grad school and kind of as a senior in kind of capstone, in y'all's experience, kind of in your education, what are things that you wish you would have delved more into in your projects that would be about kind of inclusion and diversity in your work?
To me, that's so
open-ended.
Yeah. What would you honestly, the industry is just kind of we haven't figured it all out, to be clear. And so I think the design schools haven't figured it all out either. And I think as an industry from the top to the bottom, professionally and educationally, where you're at, there's still so many questions to ask about how we get design right that makes just and equitable outcomes. And so I think the question is, what can you be? I mean, the same thing I can be doing, you can be doing in your work, and there's just lots to figure out. I mean, and so we have to be asking the questions. We have to be figuring out, man, what are the metrics by which I can go measure somehow kind of the standing of a community or the quality of life they have before the design, and so what are ways that I can think about objectively to create better outcomes with these designs. I mean, we just don't have it all figured out yet. So I think that's it. There's a lot of people who are engaged in the conversation, and there's a lot of voices to listen to. But I mean, yeah, besides that, I think it's, my point I'm trying to make is right now where we're at, everyone can contribute to the conversation. That's really exciting.
Yeah, and metric,
no,
oh,
go ahead,
go ahead.
Sarah.
Oh, I was just gonna jump on a real quick metrics. Like, so think about something like sustainability or LEED. Like you have very tangible, quantifiable numbers that you can associate with what does sustainability mean. Flip to the converse of, how do you measure sustainability? Okay, there's not saying that boxes should ever be checked, because this supersedes any kind of boxes, but equity is like, there's not that number that anybody can know or understand. And so I think, yeah, the industry is questioning it and figuring it out, and nobody has one singular answer, and I don't think ever there will be a singular answer. But yeah, I think whatever you are fascinated by, interested in, curious about, want to change is just as relevant, real, and applicable as something that Blake might do in urban design, I might do with a commercial office building. Like all of that is like on a playing field that is relevant, critical, and important.
I would agree. I'm going to speak about healthcare just because that's what my thesis was on, and that's what I do now, and I'm also a healthcare nerd. I was fortunate enough to really my thesis kind of really dealt with community in healthcare, and I have since then taken my thesis and I've written research papers with the firm, and I am like stealing the ideas of it and throwing it into all the buildings I do now, and like I will not let it die. So I'm really grateful for that, and I would say that's actually something that you could do. I am not going to go into super detail with it, but I thought about how can a hospital heal just beyond the patient? How can it actually transform a community through non-medical determinants, which is kind of the art and the practice of helping people on their day-to-day lives so that they don't end up in the facility, and teaching those type of life skills to the community so that the hospitals aren't overrun. So I would say bridging academia and the practice is actually something you can do, and being in that transition from being in your capstone to actually going to graduate school and doing a thesis to then going to the professional world, you can actually really start to sell yourself up by the research you're doing, by the publications that you're writing, and then by the job that you go after. So I hope that that helps, because that's what I'm doing. So I would hope that you would do what interests you and go after it. Oh, and one other thing is, I'm sorry, but there are 17 UN Sustainable Goals, and they actually deal a lot with community wellness. It's something that like I kind of like live by whenever I'm designing. So a lot of those talk about sustainability, but also talks about the sustainability of community. So just in case anyone's interested, you should look at them or just familiarize yourself with them. They are pretty awesome. Okay,
And
I'm gonna stop talking.
SCAD also has an incredible design for sustainability minor, which I have a minor in. So if you also have questions about that, let me know. I can put you in touch with the right department.
In terms of Chandler's question, I think too, we kind of have been asking this, like, what could you do almost like professionally? I also think there's another side to that. It's like, what we can be doing like interpersonally. And I think like and it's weird because when you're in school, your classmates are, in some ways, they're kind of like like you see them as very friendly and social. In other ways, they're kind of like your workmates. You kind of have like a professional demeanor with them in some capacity as well. But in the way that we're talking about how important it is that we have these conversations in our offices, that we recognize people who might be voices that are not being listened to in a way yet because they belong to some majority, some can't even speak right now, minority community or marginalized. I try to combine those two words. In the same way that you should be having those conversations on your campus. I mean, you should be recognizing that if we're saying we need to listen to diversity of voices, like who in your program is the diversity of voices? What can they add to the process? What is it that's happening in a studio that you're attempting to do that you may not have all the information? What does it mean for a NOMAS chapter to come and inform you about things. Like, what a great voice to like listen to the NOMAS chapter and say, teach us something that we don't know. Like those conversations just interpersonally are just as important. And yeah.
Hello, my name is Faith, and I actually have a question. So I'm a freshman here at SCAD, and I just want to thank you for being such an amazing influence. And I'm so thankful that I have such amazing role models, such like very on in my career. Sorry, that's my father's computer going off in the background. But my question was, during this time when you become like a college student, you can sometimes feel kind of lost. What's something that you'd want to tell your younger self just to make sure that they're like reassured that what they're doing is important?
Just because I only graduated like legit 2 years ago, I can say this. It takes like, it's gonna take time. I realize that. I stopped comparing myself to other people. I stopped being like super stressed, like, oh my God, I'm not doing everything right. I like, since when I stopped doing that, I have been able to sleep at night. I've been way happier. It will take time and it is okay. Believe me, there were times I had amazing reviews and times that I were ripped apart and I was like, my God, is this for me? Is this real? Today, whenever my thesis professor texts me, I still get chills and I'm like, oh my God, what does she want now? But I also write research papers with her, so it's great. But I'm just saying that like, Faith, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Really have fun with it. I know that sounds like very cliche, but you in this industry, it's kind of like a labor of love. And the more you love it, the more it's gonna give out of you. Like to me, work is really like a hobby and I love it. So I don't mind like the crazy hours. And they're not like crazy, just only sometimes. Majority of the time I actually get to like chill and enjoy my life too. And just know that when you are done with school, it does get better. It ebbs and flows.
I love that. If you're not having fun with it, especially in school, because my thesis year, I was like so ready to be done with school and was not loving it because I felt that there was, some certain standard that I had to hold myself to. And you have to, it's tough, especially with critiques, because somebody else is always telling you what they think about your projects. But I think when feeling lost, kind of go back to where that passion or that labor of love is. Go back to something that you enjoy. And sometimes that might be going for a run. Some of the best things that I figured out for studio were done on a run or not in studio. And then I came back and I was like, I feel energized. I feel better about this. I feel ready to come back to this because there was some kind of clarity achieved. So you don't have to labor at your desk for 12 hours, 15 hours. And if you're not loving it and you're not enjoying it, you definitely shouldn't be laboring at your desk. But go back, whether it's creating something else, whether it's some entirely different avenue, whether it's the same avenue that you're currently pursuing, find something that you can enjoy and that you can enjoy doing to ground you and recenter you, and then come back to what you were doing.
I just want to interject and just say, I'm sorry, like really quickly. I did not run. I always just did Korean barbecue. I hate running. So I just always ate out with my friends and I was happy after that. And I'll also say always listening to music and going on midnight drives. And sometimes we would like go into abandoned buildings and like, explore the city.
I wish I had Korean barbecue, but Blacksburg, Virginia has a shortage of Korean barbecue. So
that sounds rough. I'm sorry.
I believe that. I would add too that there's something, if no one's painted this picture before, I think it's always worth reminding that like there's such a different experience that happens in undergrad and grad programs in terms of sort of the nature of the education. The undergrad programs tend to be about bringing everyone up to the same experience and everyone's sort of saying, yes, everyone's sort of graduated with the same degree. We've learned the same things. We've taken the same classes. We're all in a good place. Where grad programs tend to be more about finding the thing that interests you and then finding the right professors and kind of taking your thing and having your base education, but really like aiming your trajectory a lot more towards where you want to go. Regardless of where you're at, within both, there's this important theme, I think, of of acknowledging the things that are really important to you and that excite you. And so I would say keep like either like a mental or a physical list when you're working on projects of things that excite you about the work. If you find yourself, you know, if you're doing a building design, you find yourself going crazy about some little something that wasn't even required, but there's like a landscape area on the side, note that you really like that project was particularly excited because you found the intersection of architecture and landscape in this little spot, you know. And if you keep that list going of different things, or I was excited about this one because I worked with a particular cultural community or was asked to design with a particular aesthetic or whatever. If you can like keep that mental list, you'll really start honing in on the thing that you love about design the most and the area of design that you find absolutely the most fulfilling. And like that is what you should be pursuing. Certainly there will be a time where you have to go out in the world and just probably get a generic job like when you start, but even still those things should like be ringing in the back of your mind of like, you know what, where I eventually want to be is I want to be doing, you know, whatever it is, I want to do hospitality design. I want to do like immersive retail, whatever. You know, if you can find like a really narrow lane, I think that you'll be a lot more fulfilled in the work that you're doing, and that can start even now. And I think that's a lot of times why it's good to be like in this in different kinds of studios that are working on different project types with different people, because you get exposure to lots of little things and can start finding that those little things that bring you joy that are starting to really like form your journey. And once you get onto the industry too, that's how you sell yourself. When you're in the industry, you have a portfolio that says, you know, X person is an expert in cultural design, loves designing spaces where people experience, blah, blah, you know, like, and so that will all be so important to your journey professionally.
Also, Faith, I just want to say too that like, you know, you started school and during a pandemic. So like, I think when things kind of calm down and when you can kind of go back to studio and be in person, like having that studio culture there is also going to kind of give you like an extra boost of like life. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just something special. And like, even now with like my coworkers, like I still have that. And also, I would also just like add, and this is really like for everyone, just finding things that feed your spirit. For me, I love music. I've been on this crazy Ariana Grande kick lately. I do not know why. I know I like the past 3 albums, I don't know what it is, but like just finding things that like you enjoy, that make you happy, that kind of allow that creativity to like flow through you is what will like keep your soul throughout school.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna embarrass Lucas a little bit right now because Lucas and I have gotten really close being co-presidents, but he listens to Wicked every day, the play.
Yes.
He listens to Wicked every
nothing
single
wrong
day.
with that.
So as
Every
soon as
day.
Josh said Ariana Grande, I was like, yeah, I know someone who has that one thing that just keeps them going. But studio culture, that's got to be the best thing that's ever happened to me, honestly. Gotta kind of get to know everyone on a personal level besides like doing the work. It really sometimes doesn't feel like work. Now it does. Virtually makes it feel like work a little bit more. But
it will get back there. Like in the professional world, it's like that. I mean, like I have a really close friend. Her name is Emily. She's an interior designer. Her and I like are as thick as thieves. And we fight like brother and sister. Like at work, I'm like, oh my God, this is not like the way, like we argue, and then we go to Panera and we eat lunch and we're like dying of laughter. And then we go back to fighting and designing. And people laugh at us, but like that's our dynamic. I don't know why. So yeah.
That's very relatable. I think we can all agree to that comfort thing that kind of soothes us. But I think that was our last question. And if we can end maybe with a group picture, like a screenshot.
Oh.
Yes.
So if everyone can, if you're still there, turn your cameras on for just like 0.2 seconds. And we can kind of get this.
Just for a hot second. We'd appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
So many beautiful people in one place.
Oh.
See,
okay.
Just like Sonia and Lucas got close, Chandler, right here is my emotional support human.
Everyone.
We've taken every single studio together and applied to all the same grad schools because we're really
Not on purpose, by the way. Not on purpose. That's just how we roll.
You guys are just that well connected.
we're just super close.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
And you already took it? I wasn't even, I don't think I was.
Oh, wait, you
the whole
already
time.
took it?
Oh, I mean, yeah, we can take a few. You guys can,
I mean, just like a 3, 2, 1 with.
Right, something like that.
You gotta count us down.
I wasn't even smiling. But
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Got it.
see, look, everyone's smiling. I love it.
Perfect. That was awesome.
Well, I just want to say thank you again so much, Sarah, Blake, Josh, Alina. Thank you all so much for coming and doing this. SCAD is so fortunate to have so many different communities of people and to have such a diverse student body. And I think that y'all were so amazing and incredible and have definitely helped prepare us to enter the working world and have helped answer a lot of questions and really opened up this incredible, beautiful discussion and dialogue that hopefully will continue into the future. And I'm so appreciative that y'all were able to do this. And thank you to everyone who came out on a Friday evening. I know that, it's hard to find a good time in this virtual world, but this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for doing this.
Of course.
Thank
Good
you.
luck to all of you during a virtual studio like world. I can only imagine how hard this is, but you got it.
Well, everyone,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.